All right, let's talk about energy. Not the kind you get from a coffee, but the real, fundamental energy that powers your every single move, thought, and heartbeat. Today, we are diving into the incredible biological engine that turns your lunch into your actual life force. I mean, have you ever really stopped to think about it? You eat some food, maybe a sandwich or a salad, and somehow that becomes the fuel for your afternoon run. How in the world does that happen? Well, it's not magic. It's an amazing process called cellular respiration. And here's the first really key idea. Our bodies don't just create energy out of thin air, they transfer it. Cellular respiration is all about unlocking the energy that's already packed away inside our food, specifically in a sugar molecule called glucose. It's what's called an exothermic reaction, which is just a fancy way of saying it releases that stored energy so our cells can actually use it. So, to really get this, let's start with a problem. A huge one, actually. It's a problem our bodies are solving for us every single second of every day. And that is a constant, nonstop demand for energy just to keep the lights on. This energy isn't just for the obvious stuff like walking or lifting something heavy. Your body is burning through energy right now as you're sitting there just to keep you warm. It's using energy to build all the things it needs, like new proteins. It's an absolutely relentless 24/7 job. And the main fuel for all this activity is glucose. Now, you can think of glucose like a barrel of crude oil. It's absolutely packed with potential energy, but it's totally useless on its own. You can't just pour oil in your gas tank and go, right? You need a refinery to turn it into usable gasoline. Well, our cells need their own kind of refinery for glucose. And that brings us to the body's main refinery. This is the big one, the primary engine for getting things done. It's called aerobic respiration. Yeah, this is our body's absolute go-to method. You can think of it as the energy superhighway. It's fast, it's powerful, and it's incredibly efficient. But like any superhighway, there's a toll, and that toll is oxygen. You absolutely have to have oxygen for this to work. The whole process is actually pretty straightforward when you break it down. You take your fuel, the glucose, and you mix it with the oxygen you breathe in. This whole reaction happens inside these tiny little power plants in your cells called mitochondria. And the result? A massive release of energy with just two harmless things left over: water and the carbon dioxide that you breathe out. Simple as that. And when I say a massive release of energy, I mean it. This process is unbelievably good at squeezing every last drop of power out of a single glucose molecule. It's the whole reason creatures like us can be so complex and do so many things. But what happens when that superhighway gets totally backed up? What if you need energy so fast that you just can't get enough oxygen to that engine? Well, for situations like that, our bodies have a plan B, an emergency backup system. Just picture it. You're in an all-out sprint to the finish line. Your heart's pounding, you're gasping for air, your muscles are absolutely screaming for more energy, but your body just can't pump oxygen to them fast enough to keep that main engine running at full power. In that exact moment of crisis, your body just flicks a switch. It goes into emergency mode and shifts over to anaerobic respiration. That little prefix "an" just means without. So this is respiration without oxygen. It's a quick and dirty way to get a burst of energy right now. And you can see the process itself is way, way simpler. There's no oxygen, no mitochondria involved. The glucose just gets partially broken down, releasing a tiny bit of energy and creating something else called lactic acid. So now we have two totally different ways our body gets energy: the main engine and the emergency backup. Let's put them side by side because the trade-offs here are absolutely crucial. And here it is, the main trade-off. Your aerobic path, the main engine, needs oxygen, but gives you this huge energy payout with byproducts you can just breathe out. The anaerobic path, your backup plan, works without oxygen, but look, the energy yield is low, and it produces a byproduct that's going to cause some problems. So here's the catch with the backup plan. First off, it is super inefficient. You're leaving most of the potential energy still locked up inside that lactic acid. And second, that lactic acid is toxic. It builds up in your muscles, and that's what causes that familiar burning feeling and fatigue when you're working out really hard. Okay, so for us, this anaerobic thing is a temporary fix, right? It's inefficient and has a nasty side effect. But what if I told you that this backup plan is actually the main event for another organism, one we use every single day? Let's completely shift gears and talk about something really humble. Yeast. It's just a tiny single-celled fungus. But for yeast, this whole oxygen-free process isn't some emergency backup. For them, it's just how they live.
See, when yeast does anaerobic respiration, a process we call fermentation, it doesn't make lactic acid like we do. Instead, it breaks glucose down into two very different, and for us, very useful things: ethanol, which is a type of alcohol, and carbon dioxide gas.
And here's where it gets amazing. That carbon dioxide, when a baker adds yeast to dough, the yeast starts fermenting, and it releases all these tiny bubbles of carbon dioxide gas. Those bubbles get trapped in the dough, making it rise. That is what gives bread its light, fluffy texture. And what about the other byproduct, ethanol? Well, that's the alcohol in beer and wine. For thousands of years, we've been using this exact same process, getting yeast to ferment the sugars in grapes or grains to create alcoholic drinks. So think about that for a second. This biological process, breaking down sugar without oxygen, is a short-term, problematic solution for a sprinting athlete. But for humanity, it's the absolute cornerstone of the global baking and brewing industries. It's the same principle, just with totally different results. So we've seen this incredible system in our own bodies, a main engine and a backup generator for energy. The same fundamental process is happening in nearly all life on Earth, from the smallest yeast to the biggest tree, each with its own little twist. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other hidden processes like this are working away, keeping us going every single day?